To all radiation enthusiasts everywhere, I bid you mellow greetings. This is KFM 301. I'm going to assume that you have already read completely Nuclear War Survival Skills by Kearny, and you've already completed, or you are perfectly ready to complete, building your own Kearny Fallout Meter. I'm also going to assume that you've watched the videos on making a modified KFM by Scott Grubel. Hope I'm saying your name right, Scott. Okay, so here's the stock Kearny Fallout Meter. Unfortunately, the top of it is not as airtight as it could be, and moisture can get into the ionization chamber. And as soon as that really happens, then it's just not going to work. So how would you fix this? Well, if you've watched Scott's videos, you see that he does a great job at figuring out a way to make it a lot more rugged on top. For me, my version, I used caulking along the top. Just applied regular silicone sealant on a piece of hard plastic. And you might source this piece of hard plastic from any number of places. I cut it out from garbage, essentially. A wrapper that was packaging something like this. And you can make a lot of these and have them ready to go. Okay, so the next way that moisture can get in on a stock Kearny Fallout Meter is through the holes in the side that you punch to allow the stop threads to hold the leaves in place. So seal those holes up really well. You can use hot glue or you can use caulk, but just make sure that you don't damage the stop threads when you do so. Now, just like in Scott Grubel's design, I use electrical tape to create a moisture-proof barrier to make it airtight. I use that connection between the top can and the bottom can. So whenever you attach a new prepared desiccant that's been kept dry, the two cans make good contact and that seal is airtight. Okay, so now we have multiple cartridges, if you will, ready to replace a cartridge that has become saturated. So each one of these cans, you can just remove the top can from the bottom can, take the old cartridge away and recharge it, and instantly pop on a new cartridge with new desiccant inside. I like to put a contrasting piece of white paper with indicating silica gel beads right on top. Still lets the moisture get absorbed. You can see I've got some blue indicating silica gel beads on top here, permanently attached to the top next to the gauge on the inside, so that even when I'm changing the desiccant, that's going to remain there. Okay, last up for the changes. I've made some changes to the Kearny Fallout Meter for usability. How easy is it to charge up the Fallout Meter, and how would you use the information provided on the dose rate table that's on the side of the can? Okay, so you can see on the side of my version, I've got my dose chart still pretty much the same, except I've added a reading for 1 millimeter, if you've got good eyesight, that row at the top. And then color-coded it so that we can know what to expect if we're seeing these rates, and those rates are constant for a week. And then let's talk about charging the static electricity. Now, the original design calls for either unrolling a roll of Scotch tape very quickly or rubbing different pieces of different materials together and generating a static charge that way. I would definitely agree with Scott Grubel that it's much easier to use a short length of PVC pipe, and I just have one modification of what I use versus what I saw from his video. Now, for charging up my version of the Kearny Fallout Meter, I like to use this faux fur that has very, very long individual hairs and a 2-inch PVC pipe. I don't know exactly how long it is. I think it's maybe 15 to 17 inches. This setup consistently delivers some really impressive shocks and doesn't let me down. So when I move this PVC pipe close enough to the charging wire, I can really hear the static electricity flying. And because of the way I've engineered the charging wire, the tip of that charging wire sits close enough to those leaves that the spark always jumps down and it never drains off the static charge from those foil leaves. For my version of the Kearny Fallout Meter, I completely seal the top. There's a tiny pinprick hole right next to the millimeter scale where the charging hole is inserted. That gets completely sealed off with clear packing tape when it's not in use, which makes it moisture proof. When it is in use, I peel back the packing tape, exposing the tiny hole, and I insert my charging wire carefully into that hole. Charging up a KFM is actually one of the more difficult parts because static electricity likes to jump around in places that you don't expect. I've noticed that the design of the charging wire can be a big hindrance, or it can really help you. Something that's very stable, like this improvised design that I've done, can really help you out. And due to the properties of static electricity, the top end being rounded and insulated really keeps the static electricity charge from tending to jump backwards out into the moist air outside the can. And a pointy, smaller wire that's joined to the larger insulated wire, that's a larger diameter, seems to really throw the static electricity charge very well because of its pointy end. And lastly, I have this length of plastic to act as an insulator so that I can pull away the charging wire from this area without getting my hand too close. If I was to accidentally touch this, then I might still have an issue with bleeding off the static electricity charge. And when I have successfully charged up the KFM, I just seal the packing tape so that the tiny hole is completely sealed off. Above all, just keep experimenting. Keep using the Fallout Meter design that you've created and make sure that it works well for you. And if you're interested in other things like fallout shelters or maybe making your own Geiger counter at home from homemade parts, check out some of the links in the description because I've looked into that too. All right. See you.
They call it a mine.